Hey everyone, this is Kerry Magara, and I'm autistic and have dysgraphia, and am a professional speaker, best-selling author, and autism entertainment consultant. I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight with Sandy, who is in the UK. She's an autistic teacher. She was actually only diagnosed with autism as an adult. Some of the things that she likes to do, she enjoys painting. She enjoys sketching as well. And we're going to share a little bit about her social media channels later during the interview. But Sandy, thank you so much for being our guest tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So Sandy, I ask this question to every person I interview, and it's usually the first question, and it's a little broad in nature, but what would you like the world to know about you?
I think not to judge a book by its character. I think naturally people, like I've always said, that it's that whole perception that, oh, I've had it so many times where you don't look autistic. And it's like, we'll stop judging and putting people into little boxes and labeling them, and almost to show that even if you are on the spectrum, that actually you can go places and you can do things. Our brain operates in a different way, but with everything in place and the right resources, that actually we are able to get where we want to as well. And it's just making people more aware of some of the signs and not missing those early signs. And I suppose with me being diagnosed at such a later age, it's kind of like, especially for those that are girls as well, because what they deem to be normal for us and our obsessions, they're some of the reasons why we get missed off the system. And it's to just make people a little bit more aware, parents, carers, that actually maybe if there's little things that's going on with your child and you spot those earlier signs, that's probably the right time, because the earlier you get the help, the quicker you can put things in place.
That is so well said. And what inspired you to go into teaching? For everyone at home, Sandy is now a fourth grade teacher.
I think it was more so, I sat down, I was doing a job, I was a graphic designer before this. I absolutely love art. So all the time people said, what, do you want to be an art teacher? But weird thing is, it's kind of the gift that comes with autism. I can sketch, I can paint, but I cannot teach someone else how to do it. My brain, it just happens. Everyone can draw, everyone can paint. So to actually sit there and try to teach someone how to do it, I can't do it. So I was like, I can't be an art teacher, no chance, not at all. So I went into graphic design, and one day I sat there and I thought, is this my life? Am I going to be sitting here 9 till 5 with 4 weeks annual leave, and that's where it ends? And then I decided to pack my bags, go to Bali, and went to an orphanage, and started to spend some time with the kids. And at that point, I was like, actually, this feels like there's a purpose. And that was the first time where I thought, maybe teaching. But I had to start all over again and go and get certain grades and get into the profession, do my teacher training. So that was the main reason at the beginning, that I want to do something with a purpose. I want to do something that makes a difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I continue to tell people teachers are the backbone of our society. Being a mentor today, I have learned so much more from my autistic mentees than I think I could ever teach them. And I'm sure you're similar in being a teacher. So obviously, and you mentioned girl autism really quickly. So obviously girls are way less diagnosed than boys in our community. Was that one of the reasons why you received your diagnosis so late? Were you misdiagnosed with anything when you were a child?
Completely missed off. So it's really, I think once you actually know about autism and what to look out for, those signs are there. So while I was young, growing up, I was an introvert, kept myself to myself, didn't have any speech delay, didn't have any fine motor skill issues or anything. So I hit all the milestones that every child is expected to meet. But you just find me in a corner, just sketching and painting, and just to be left alone. But then little things from role play. So what role play looks in being younger was with dolls, but that is deemed to be normal. Every girl plays with dolls. So having role play with dolls, that's absolutely normal. But obsession with Lego, and I remember I used to get quite obsessed with little figures. And once, I still remember it, it was little Toby in a helicopter. The moment I lost him, my world was over. But so it's little things like that, but that's deemed to be normal for a girl. But what was a little bit different was I'm sensitive to sound. So growing up, when I went into secondary school, I was in assembly, a hall full of children, and I passed out. And at that time, I thought maybe she was feeling a little bit hot, not feeling well. And then it was a repetitive pattern. Anywhere there was too much people, too much crowd, the noise and the sensory overload was getting too much for me, and I'd eventually pass out. And that's where the things, it was like, oh, that's different. But obviously through my diagnosis, I found out different things about myself and different sensories and how that is heightened, just like my texture in my food. So I wouldn't eat anything unless it's smothered in sauce. Until this day, that still stands. But yeah, so those little things. And I think as I grew up to be a woman, my obsessions changed, and they were with heels, shoes, hats, clothes. But you don't see that. That's absolutely normal. But my wardrobe is all set out in color coordinated. So
Right.
the blues, the reds, the greens. But yeah, so I think those little things were, yeah, you're just being a woman. That's normal, right? But the only difference would be I'd go shopping, and then I'd walk past something with fur, and I'd have to go and stroke it. I'd even have to walk back to just run my fingers through it. So it's that whole sensory element of anything with fur, anything shiny. But yeah, so I think about myself as when I try to describe what it might look like, I talk about a cat and how cats like fur and anything shiny.
So I had sensory challenges growing up as well, and they were a lot of textural issues as well. Did you ever have any issues with communication at all?
I think making eye contact was a big one. So when I'm really uncomfortable with someone or in a new situation, I really struggle to maintain eye contact. So I'll tend to kind of look behind them, look down. So that's quite difficult at times. And I think even in workplaces, when I first start off, that could be perceived as, oh, you're being a little bit rude. She just keeps her head down. But I remember when I first started teaching, and everyone would say, oh, good morning, Sandy. And my head will be down, and I'd say, yeah, good morning, and walk straight past. And until everyone found out, oh, she's on the spectrum, they was like, oh, that makes sense now. We thought she was just being rude. Walking into the staff room was the worst thing till this day. To walk in, to warm my food up, to know there's people there. I literally have to put my head down, nod, morning, and just kind of warm my food and walk back out. So it's that kind of communication. But once I'm comfortable with someone, I can't stop talking. And it's kind of reading the signals. Stop. Okay, breathe.
So very, very well said. So we actually have a lot of questions coming in. You are kind of awesome. So just from the past 8 minutes of this interview, you seem like we could talk for hours. But Bart, who's actually a friend, wrote in and he says, what do your students most appreciate about you? And I would like to just add a little bit. So how long have you been teaching?
For 4 years now.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's been quite new.
And what do you think your students most appreciate about you?
I think the fact that I tend to be a friend, and I always say that, especially when it's like behavior issues and everything else, if you've got a good relationship with your kids and that they want to work for you, and even when they're in a bad situation, because it's you, you see, if they can see that you're disappointed, they don't want to disappoint you when they've got that relationship. And I think when I am in the classroom, I am like a big child, and I like things to be fun, and we'll have Fridays at the moment.
You're a child at heart.
We'll put music on Fridays. Every time we survive a week of no bubble closures in the class, we party and we celebrate on a Friday at the end of the day to say, yep, we're COVID free. We can carry on. We're here next week to see each other. So yeah.
So that brings up the whole COVID-19 pandemic. Are you currently, well, for everyone at home, Sandy is based in the UK and they're on lockdown. How has the challenges of virtual learning impacted your students?
Oh, it's been very difficult. UK, we're not quite, when it comes to US, you guys are a little bit more advanced with technology, so it's been quite new for us on this side. Zoom was the thing everyone turned to on this side. And I think generally it's been the issue with kids not having access to internet, especially because the school that I teach is a disadvantaged area. So it's the whole not having parents that were actually working or pushing their kids to go online. So I think the first time around in national lockdown, it was very different. But then now we've gone into national lockdown again. So home learning, because we've become more familiar with it, we've realised, okay, these are our barriers. This is what worked. This isn't what worked. So yeah, so we're still kind of trying to figure it out. So my first Zoom starts next week on Monday. So that will be interesting.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm excited to see all the kids, and they seem quite excited. But I think because I'm quite tech savvy myself, I've trained them up quite well. So fingers crossed, we've got no tech issues on the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen so many, just for everyone at home. I've just as my role as a mentee or mentor, I've seen so many routine changes for so many people in our autism community. So the importance of a daily schedule is really, really key, because you want to come back to some place of certainty for these kids. So it's not a lot of unknown and trying to figure out how to help them in different areas, especially if they have sensory challenges, communication challenges, et cetera, and so forth. So we have a few more questions coming in. So this question comes from Sayed. I apologize if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Did you know what age you started talking and communicating?
I tend to hit my milestones quite quick. So as far as I know, I think by the time I was 1, I was saying a few words and communicating. I didn't have that many problems, but I was introverted in myself, but I would still be able to communicate. So I didn't have those issues when I was growing up.
Got it. Yeah. And honestly, I hear from so many girls on the autism spectrum. And what I loved, which I was looking at your Instagram page for people at home, you can follow her at Unspoken 1990, was you were talking a little bit about masking. Now, I think masking impacts so many girls, not only girls, but boys, but so many girls in our autism community. Did you used to mask when you were younger, and do you still do some masking today?
Oh gosh, yeah, we're masters at masking. Yeah, so till this day, I think while I was younger, it's hard for me to say if I did or didn't because I don't quite remember. But then it's naturally whatever social setting you might be in, we know how to play the audience. We know the character to become. So yeah, and I know that I 100% still do it till this day. Yeah. And it just seems so natural as well. It's like you don't have to think about it. You just sit there and you kind of analyze, and then you literally put your mask on, give them a smile, and that's it. And you're ready to go.
So for me, I also notice when I mask, and it has a lot to do with eye contact. I'm like, I have found this way of just looking at people's forehead, and it makes them like seem like I'm looking right in the eyes. But I deal with a lot of burnout because of masking in some situations. Is that something you've also had to overcome?
Yeah, definitely. Especially if I've been in a situation, because we might have to go and deliver something. It might be teacher training or anything like that. Or if I've spent, it might be a wedding that I've attended and I've had to interact with a lot of people. So it's a sensory overload. It's the sound and the music. So I know coming home, sometimes it can take me a whole weekend to recover because the sensory overload is too much and the masking, and it just takes it out of you.
Absolutely. So again, everyone, my name is Dr. Carrie Magro, and I'm here today with the amazing Sandy, and we're talking a little bit about her journey. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments, and we'll try to get to as many as we can during this time. There is a great question that I absolutely adore, because I was actually just talking to one of my mentees about disclosure the other day, and now, of course, I'm going to lose it. Let's see. Disclosure. There we go. From Christina. Hi, Christina. Christina writes, do you have any tips for self-disclosure in professional environments? Have you ever disclosed your diagnosis to an employer before?
The first time I did it was in the teaching environment, and I think that was because I felt that I had to, especially with the sensory and the sound and everything else. What happened was when I first started teaching, teachers, we have to mark and we can be there sitting for hours. But before I would even sit down to mark my books, I would look around my room and I would have to put everything in place, what looked in place for me. So the table had to have everything in center. The pencils had to be correctly placed in the right place and what looked in the center for me. So I would spend almost an hour after the kids had gone just sorting the room out. Then I'd eventually sit down and everything would have to be done in that order. And I was literally burning out and I couldn't get to that point where I was like, do you know what, this is taking too much out for me. But then I disclosed it obviously with the head teacher and they were really supportive about it. And the first thing they said to me was, because I've had a whole report, sent it over to them. So they referred me, they said, if you want an occupation, that's fine. So you can go and see them. And I decided to go and see them, but it didn't work out for me because to sit there and have an occupational therapist to sit there and tell you that this is the way you should be able to deal with this at work, those tips weren't working for me because I could tell that the person had no idea about the spectrum and what it looked like. They tried to say that, oh, actually try not to have too much control on the situation. Maybe should be out the class for 2 days. But what they didn't understand is, but I needed to be in the classroom. I need to have that control and know exactly where everything is. But yeah, so I turned around and said to my employer that actually, thank you so much for putting me forward for the occupational therapist and I appreciate it. But I've decided that's not something I'm going to pursue. And I said, I'd rather deal with whatever the issues might be on my own because I've dealt with it for so long. And I think when you're on the spectrum yourself, you know yourself what your barriers are, what helps and how you can play that. So I decided to do that on my own. But like I said, at the beginning, sometimes it is one of those where you think, will I be judged? Will they start taking tasks away from me thinking, oh, she's not capable, they can't do that. But actually, I think the fact that I waited and then told them in a way helped because they thought, hold on, we've spent this long with Sandy. She seems to be capable to do X, Y, Z. And we didn't put that together. So sometimes people go, instead of going in straight with a judgment, if you walk in on the first date, yep, by the way, I'm on the spectrum. Everyone has his judgment of you straight away, but allowing them to see before you end up disclosing, I think in my situation worked in my favor. And I think naturally, as much as people say they don't judge and yet they'll support you, the last thing you want to be is treated different. And people do it without not realizing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to the judging a book by its cover. It's like you kind of just see what's on the surface and you're not necessarily sure about how that person is going to interact, how that person is dealing with their own internal struggles. So very, very well said. I am so curious. Do you have a blog? I feel like we could transcribe all of your answers and just make them into blog posts and they would go like viral.
No, not at the moment. I've thought about writing and stuff at the moment in that time because I'm getting so much from my unspoken page and so many families, so many carers asking for different tips and struggles that they're going through. And it's so lovely when you can actually relate. So it's been quite nice and just to get in touch.
Absolutely. So for everyone watching at home, what I'll do is I will include her Twitter and Instagram information in the comments. So feel free to give her a follow. That's actually on her Instagram page is where I learned a little bit about her masking. Jeremy, no problem. I got you. Jeremy also asked it. This is a great question because it's so prevalent within our autism community. For everyone watching at home, I see for the most part communication being the number one obstacle facing many on the spectrum. But the second one is sensory challenges, which could lead to a lot of these meltdowns. Sandy, do you have any recommendations on how to recognize meltdowns before they happen?
Well, I've had 4 this year, which is very rare for me. The last one I recall having was when I was 18 years old. And I think after that, I've been quite good at being able to control them. But I think just the way the year has taken its toll and been out of routine and every time there's been a massive change, it's completely thrown me. And what tends to happen is, I think, for myself, I tend to build everything up, never talk about how I'm feeling or how it makes me feel, just mask it as you do. And then when things get too much, that's it. I literally go completely. But I think the earlier signs I see is when I know I'm about to have a meltdown, I tend to shut down from my surroundings, from people. But then in that moment when I'm having a meltdown, I find myself getting quite flustered. I find myself breathing quite heavily, and I just know that it's coming. So much so that my family around me have experienced it, and even they know the moment it's about to happen, they all end up around me and they know what's going to happen, but they've seen it, so they know me as a person. She'll start breathing heavy. Eye contact completely goes, and everyone's like, Sandy, look at me, just trying to maintain eye contact. But it's been a tough year, to say the least. Well, last year, not this year.
Yeah, and no, I mean, we already talked a little bit about how your students were doing during COVID-19. How are you doing just personally with this weird pandemic that started in March of last year, and it's kind of, we're getting the vaccine now, but you guys are on lockdown. How has everything been for you?
Oh gosh, it's been hit and miss. I think just when you think things are heading the right direction, and I think being in working gives you stability, it gives you routine. So the moment that was taken out, it was my whole life turned upside down. But I knew for me, it takes almost 2 weeks to adjust to a new routine. So I sat there. The first 2 weeks were very difficult. I made myself a timetable and thought, okay, I need to do ABC first, and I know it's going to take me 2 weeks to adjust to it, but I have to stick to this new routine. And then it takes me 2 weeks to get into it. And then once I've adjusted, I'm absolutely fine. By the time I adjusted to everything and was feeling really comfortable, it was time to go back. Lockdown was lifted. Yep, teachers are ready to go back. So that then completely threw me. And I was going back not only to a new class, but the fact that school was so different. The children's seating was different. There were so many expectations. We can't mix with bubbles. There were so much restrictions with the resources. The teaching style was changed, whereas for maths we might use different resources, but then it was the fact that actually you can't use those resources because that's mixing, and the pencils were all labeled differently. So everything was just so different. But I think for me, being at school, it gave that routine. Again, after those 2 weeks, I just did really well. But then with my class, I work in a mainstream school. So over in UK, it's a little bit different. So the SEN children are actually with us in the class in a mainstream school. So I've got 2 children that are say you're low functioning. I've got 3 children that are high functioning. So for me, straight away, my priority was them, because I know how I would feel. For me, it's like I need to get them straight into a routine. Even though we was told, ease your children in, ease the classes in, we're not talking all about works and grade. But for me, I knew that they needed routine, they needed that stability. So we went straight in, right, we're starting with English, then we've got maths. And till this day, they haven't had a meltdown. And there's one child that I work with especially, she's known to flip tables and have meltdowns and everything. And mom is just so surprised. She's like, I cannot believe that she's not had a meltdown till this day, and she is thriving. She's done so well, and it's just felt felt satisfying. It's the fact that she started from P levels, now working at grade 2, and it's crazy. It's like, how has this child that has missed 6 months of education has actually excelled? And it's been lovely to see. And I do have a soft spot for SEN kids, so I do tend to give them everything. So it has been a nice journey. And I think that's a scary thing about going into lockdown again, is the fact that all the hard work that we've put in, and we know how important it is for them children. They're the children that are on my mind the most, because they need that routine. And how is this change going to affect them after 6 weeks?
So I have a dear friend, and I'm going to give him a shout out because I absolutely love him. I don't know if you know him, Sandy. Jesse Saperstein. He is an award-winning author, professional speaker such as myself. Me and Jesse have known each other for years on end. Jesse, I think we met each other at a New York event, but you have a lot of great comments coming in. I just want to highlight this one, saying that you're an inspiration. I'm sure you hear that all the time. Is there any way we could get you in the United States? That's like, that's another question coming in.
I travel to the States frequently. I live in the States practically. And last year I was supposed to be in LA, California, Atlanta. I literally go from state to state. So but only when they'll let us in. The barriers, everyone's put their barriers up to United Kingdom with our new variant. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm based in New Jersey, and in New York, they're talking about just stopping the New York to UK. So we live in some very, very interesting times. I love this question. because obviously for everyone watching at home, I'm also on the spectrum. And what I continue to see is that the popular image of autism is focused on children. But what happens to individuals when they're adults, especially when it comes to receiving services and getting that diagnosis? So Jeanette writes, hi, Jeanette. How did you get a late diagnosis? Did you schedule evaluation yourself? And was it recommended by another professional?
Yeah, so a bit of both, really. So while I was on my teacher training and I started learning about children on the spectrum, to be fair, many years before that, I watched a program on TV and it was about those on the spectrum. And at that point, I thought, this is interesting. And your mind starts to wonder. And I started to do a bit of research about what is autism, what are the signs? And I started to pick up little things. So I've always been kind of fascinated about the mind and how it all works and neurons and everything else. So when I did end up teacher training and I thought, actually, this makes a lot of sense, all that time I've been wondering, I'm a little bit odd. I don't make eye contact. I contort my body. So that means I usually sit up with my legs up. I sit with my legs crossed. I can be in any professional environment. I'll do that. So all those little things start to point out that something doesn't sit right. I ended up going to an autism show and was listening to a keynote speaker who is on the spectrum themselves, had a little chat with them, and that's where it all kind of started from. And a lady that I went to see straight away and I walked in, she said, the moment you walked into my office, she's like, I knew you was on the spectrum. And it was interesting to see she was on the spectrum. She's got an MBE and everything herself. I went to the doctor before I went to see her, and the doctor, when I was going to go through the process, and they have to refer you to a psychologist and a therapist and everything else, and he asked me about the signs. Why do you think that? And he said to me, he goes, to be honest, that sounds like OCD. Completely missed it. And I sat there and I thought, oh, wow, that's fine. But do you know what? I'm actually in the teaching world and this is what SEN looks like. But you're going to sit here in front of me and tell me that seems like OCD. The fact that you put things in rows and the fact that you're very particular about this and that. No, that just sounds like OCD. But then the moment I went to a professional who's actually on the spectrum herself, she's got 2 daughters, it was fascinating. She said, the moment I seen you, she's like, the moment you walked in, she goes, your body language, your eye contact, she goes, it's like having a red flag. And then it was fascinating. And as I've gone on throughout my journey, it is like a red flag. I'd walk across, and when I've got a new class, straight away, those ones that are on the higher end of the spectrum, it's like a red flag. I'm like, that's a bit quirky. And I put the pieces together and it's like, on the spectrum. But then it's a sad thing about it that they get missed off the system, because getting an educational health plan on this side of the world is a long process. But if you're on the higher end, you're achieving all the grades, for them, no, it's fine. You're fine. Those kids aren't high priority, as they call it. And it's so frustrating because naturally people believe if you're high functioning, you're fine. You haven't got those issues. You'll be, the sensory overload. Yep, you can manage. You can deal with it.
Yeah, we talk a lot, especially in my community, about labels, and the whole concept of just getting rid of the high functioning, low functioning, and just making it autism, simply because of, granted, it is a spectrum, and there are going to be a lot of people who need more support than others, but it feels like if we just start a conversation by saying this person has autism and these are some of the strengths versus weaknesses, then people don't go. And for example, for me, I would be considered, I guess, high functioning when it comes to communication. I'm a speaker, but my sensory challenges are little to close to what is high functioning. So I feel like, especially when we talk about labels, maybe that's something we need to have a larger conversation about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So we have, we have a lot of parents writing in. Thank you all so much. Sandy is an autistic teacher from the UK who is answering our questions tonight as part of this Facebook Live. A lot of people want to follow you on social media, so I'll post the comments again. We already answered, you have 2 students who are on the autism spectrum?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And so with so many autism diagnoses, there tends to be a dual diagnosis and different diagnoses that sometimes go along with that. Did you ever struggle with anxiety?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. I think for me, being on the spectrum, I always need to know what's happening, what's next. And we always talk about, even with the children at school, when I'm setting out a timetable, I'll give them a visual timetable to show them that this will happen next. But the moment there's a change in routine, it can throw them off unless they don't know. If they know about it, it helps them prepare. But I think the anxiety always comes from the times when I was least prepared and those changes and not being sure about what was next. But yeah, anxiety come along with all of that. And I think at the moment, hence my 4 meltdowns last year, was the fact that nothing seems clear at the moment with COVID, and it's just the not knowing what happens next. And that's when anxiety is really high and all those emotions, and then that can eventually, for me, lead into a meltdown.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, that was just so well said. I deal with a little bit of anxiety myself as somebody on the spectrum, and I did a lot of role playing therapy growing up, which helped me kind of put myself into a situation before I was in that situation, which helped me tremendously. This is another great question. As an adult, have you received any form of therapy or any supports that have helped you?
No, not at all,
Fair enough.
unfortunately.
Fair
To
enough.
be honest, it has been social media for me, for me, like pages like yourself and following those people that are on the spectrum or parents and carers. It was all the research. I like to read and essays, and Jennifer O'Toole, her
Yes.
absolutely love that book. And it's so lovely when you pick up a book and you read that first line and you think, yeah, someone that gets it. Yeah.
I am friends with Jennifer O'Toole, so I'm going to be tagging her in the comments of this Facebook Live. Maybe she'll give you a shout out. Do you know her personally?
No, I just read her book in Autism in Heels and absolutely fell in love with it.
Well, good. I'm going to give her a shout out and a message later and just be like, you have to meet Sandy. She's the next upcoming professional speaker, and she'll be on the circuit with you soon. Uh, so yeah, no, I honestly, so for me, therapy was occupational speech, music, theater, and a little bit of physical therapy for my fine motor. I see a few questions coming in from parents who are discussing what are the best therapies. Jesse, of course, I would give you a shout out. You don't have to mention anything. You're good. You're good. Oh, this is a great question. It also comes from Jesse. Jesse writes, do you mind explaining what is the hardest part of being a woman on this end of the autism spectrum? I've been told by one of my female friends with autism that it's difficult because people expect far more from her due to the superficial perception of normalcy.
Oh, and that's a nice question.
Yeah.
I think it's the masking. I think naturally, it's that whole trying to fit in growing up as a woman. And I think it's that all comes with it. For instance, I tend to stim, which is usually my rock or my fingers. But if I'm in public, I have to try to control that. And I have to tell myself, if we don't put your legs up, sit properly, look around you, you're in a public setting, you can't do that. Or really trying to refrain myself from rocking, because I think I'm going to draw that attention to myself. So especially if I'm on public transport or in social settings, that's probably been one of the hardest. And I think one of them has been being in a large crowd of people and having to communicate, making that eye contact in that large setting. But it's really strange when I'm passionate about something, I can stand in front of a room full of people and I can talk. The moment, if it involves technology, if it involves autism, the things that I'm passionate about, I can talk. But any other time where I have to meet and greet, head down, and it's just, So I really struggle with that. And I think that's where the masking comes in place and looking around and observing my environment.
Let's talk a little bit about your passions. So obviously, the photo that we used as the cover image for this Facebook Live was this really beautiful painting. And you also do some sketching. What got you interested in the arts, and do you have any other passions?
So I think I still remember I was in grade 4 myself, and the first thing I painted was a cow. And I remember the teacher saying to my parents, "Your child's gifted." And I still remember that painting very vividly. And from there, I've always just been interested. I've always painted. I've always sketched. It's just been something right from the beginning. At the beginning, it was Disney. It was the cartoon. I wanted to be a cartoonist and all sorts. And then as I grew up, I started to experiment a little bit with portrait. So yeah, so I think I just like nature, anything. I do enjoy just painting, sketching, just challenging myself. But yeah, so that's my biggest passion. I do love drawing and sketching. But on the other side is technology. So I'm quite tech savvy, so I like the whole Apple and everything else. But for me, I think the biggest thing with technology has been it's the new way almost. And I've been trying to find ways, how does it help those on the spectrum? Because if technology has come this far, well, what are the advantages of it to help those children? And some of the things that I have used that have worked really well, for instance, some of the kids, they talk about children on the spectrum, they need a brain break. And I think the hardest thing for them is to be in a classroom, a child, I find it hard myself to sit there for an hour to listen to someone. So after every 10 minutes, I would have the iPad, put a 10-minute timer, which is visual for them, and they could wander off, do an activity themselves. But as that time's going down, they know that actually, yeah, when they come back, they have to return and do an activity. But every activity is timed because it's that knowing for them. They need to know how long is this activity, when is it break time, when is it this. But so I've been experimenting with technology and trying to slot that in with education and how does it help SEN children? How can I bring that in to actually push their learning further? So yeah, so it's been really good and it's been great for like visual timetables and even with like you can watch sensory videos to help them as well. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I love the timers, even the physical timers. For people watching at home, there's a great website called timetimer.com. It's literally just a visual timer where if you're working on developmental milestones, anything at all, really, it's just great to have that structure in place so they can be visually just being able to see the countdown in their own heads. This is a great follow-up question to that just came in. And it talks about inclusive classrooms. Maha, I hope I'm saying all of your names right tonight. I apologize ahead of time. Maha writes, teaching environments are not always inclusive and are often too rigid. And I agree. And I was wondering what changes, adjustments you would recommend to neurotypical teachers to help support autistic kids in school?
Yeah, this absolutely, yeah, this is the issue that I have, and I have to bite my tongue so many times. I personally think that those teachers, your neurotypical teachers, they first of all need to be trained what autism is. And I think the hardest thing is that they don't understand the child. They don't understand why they behave, why they might stim, why they might make those sounds, those little things. By understanding why they do it, then actually you know that that's what they need to do. I know some of the issues that I might find in schools is usually when a child is stimming, they're shaking their legs or they're making that sound and they think, oh, you tell that child, no, you've got to stay quiet, be quiet now. And it's like, no, that's not the way. That's their way of expressing. And that whole almost having that idea that no, they know that child is not going to get those grades, so not putting things in place that they should. So I think first of all is knowing what autism looks like, and I think it's knowing how you can plan for them. And I think that's some of the things that some of the teachers that I know have struggled with. They said we've never had to plan for SEN children. Like, what does it actually look like? And when I've shared different ideas and different ways of doing it, but because they don't know, they kind of leave it to, we have TAs, your teaching assistants, or your one-to-ones. They expect your one-to-ones because they work with that child. Yeah, they'll provide the resources. They'll do this. But for me, the teachers are the experts. And they're the ones that have been trained in this field. And actually, if you're never going to give yourself the chance to learn about that child, how are you possibly going to help? So definitely, first of all, learn about autism. Learn about what it looks like in women, what it looks like in boys and girls, and the different aspects of the spectrum and what it can look like. I've worked with children over the last 3 years, one that was nonverbal, one that could speak quite a bit, could articulate and everything else, but academically, nope, not happening. I've got two girls with me, which is the first time ever, two girls that are on the spectrum, and it's so fascinating to watch them because for me, it's like, I've worked with boys that are on the spectrum, so it's quite interesting to see their obsessions, and it's the princesses and it's fairies, but all those things, to know that actually each and every one is different. If you know what they operate and how they work, that's the only way you can help them. But they have to be willing to learn.
I loved everything about that. And for people watching at home, if you see me move my head or look down, I'm just reading all your comments. I swear I'm listening to Sandy. And Sandy, one of the things I loved about what you said is I feel like a lot of the times we don't hear enough in the general ed classrooms about autism. And I feel like sometimes there was this great article from Ed Week just a few months ago that was talking about that. Only about every 1 in 3 teachers receive any form of paraprofessional training in special education. So I feel like a lot of the times it's not only about educating the students as much as it is about educating the educators, because there might be a child who's never diagnosed with autism but has different characteristics, a girl who might have never received a formal diagnosis. So the importance of just learning some of the signs can really be helpful, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
This is a great question. It might be a little too specific, but I'll ask you this anyway, Sandy, and we'll see what your thought is. Melissa writes, hi, Melissa. Class size plays a huge part in performance, typical autistic. How many students do you think is too many in one room?
I think this depends on the child itself. I think at the moment I've got 30 kids and I've got 2 children that are on the spectrum as well. And for them, that works. But again, for another child, that possibly wouldn't work. So
Yeah.
I think that depends on the child itself, because every child's sensory need is different. For one child, it can be information overload, the sound, the children in there. But the same time, I feel that my kids thrive of being with everyone else because they're included. And I make sure, the English and the maths might be differentiated to meet their needs. However, when we're doing science, how we're doing history, they're involved. Because for me, it's not about your academics and grades in that situation. To know what the Egyptians and the Mayans did, that they're fine. They can do that. They can access that learning. Art, they can access that. For me, actually, your foundation subjects are the ones that they can access. And they literally, my kids buzz off it. The moment they know they're getting involved with the whole class, I make sure that at the moment, if they've got English and maths, they sit at the back, they've got their own table and they've got their one-to-one, and I'll check over. But the moment in the afternoon, nope, they're coming in with the class, they're sitting with whoever they want to next to each other, and hands are going up throughout. And even while I'm teaching English, whatever I'm teaching my kids, the rest of them, theirs is always linked to what we're doing. So they will always have to stop. They'll always watch the videos with us. So I'll always find a way that they're still included. I don't want them to do something completely different, because they know when something looks different. They know that when they're not doing the same, or they've got a different worksheet. So for me, so it all depends on the child. However, like I said, if there's a child with sensory overload, there's a chance that might not work.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I had kind of a little bit of interesting worlds of education. I went from a private school setting to a public school setting, back to a private school setting, and then back to a public school setting, where both private school settings were like 8-to-1 student-teacher ratio, and then public school was anywhere from 25 to 37-to-1. So, I mean, I understand some people's mindset about it has to be, it's a spectrum. So not everything is going to work for that individual. And what I would say about larger group sizes, maybe not 25, 37-to-1, is that there's more possibility of building on social skills and friendships, which I sometimes see fall through the cracks. Do you see a lot of social skills falling through the cracks in terms of your own education as a teacher?
Yeah, I think even generally kids sometimes struggle with social skills, but I think it's quite fascinating when I watch the kids on the playground, especially those that are on the spectrum. They like to be on their own and they're happy with it. And they tend to play with about 2-3 different children and integrate, but very easily. And I think the fact that they tend like their own company, they can easily like stay away from that social setting and wanting to get involved. So yeah, you can see that happening as well.
So, Sandy, what's next for you? What are some of your goals for yourself in the future, and what should we be looking forward to seeing?
Well, I've been working on a book, so I'm currently writing at the moment. So it's called Unspoken as well. So I've been working on that on the side, and it's just to give people an insight of what it is, what autism looks like growing up as a young girl to a woman. But I think for me, I have this goal of wanting to go into different schools and train different staff up and teach them what autism looks like, and to stand there and say autism can look like this as well. But you need to realize along with that, these are the struggles that do come along, but this is how you can help as well. But I think it's been quite painful at the same time seeing professionals that aren't aware. Even if a doctor can sit there in front of me and tell me it's OCD, and it was like, but you're supposed to be trained in this, right? You're supposed to be able to sit there and help me in the situation. And I think it's actually, we need to be able to do something. And who knows autism with someone that either a parent or carer or someone has witnessed it themselves. And I think actually that's where it's slipping, is the education. It's when people do learn about autism, it comes to a surprise, like, oh, we didn't know that's what it is. We didn't know that's what it involves. And it's like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I think just to get it out there, make people more aware of the different struggles and the different ways we can overcome them. And like I said, for me, it's the biggest thing is notice those signs early, and that way you can get that help in earlier on.
So the book is Unspoken. That will be amazing. Do you have a publisher? Or are you doing the self-publish route?
At the moment, I haven't done anything with it, so it's
Oh,
just something I've just started. Yeah, so it's just early days.
nice. But everyone watching at home, you can follow Sandy. In the comments is the link to her Twitter and Instagram pages. So please give her a follow. If you're looking for anyone to come to your child's school, for a speaker, I know we're kind of in COVID-19 right now, virtual speakers, please let her know. I also do virtual speaking around the country as a professional speaker. So definitely take her up on that. I think we definitely need more first-person perspectives, especially in our school systems. And I love the quote, which has been a disability advocacy quote for decades now, nothing about us without us. And I think it's so, so important. Don't just read about autism, learn by getting to know people who have autism. So we have a few questions that come in, and I'm going to rope these in together because we haven't talked about this subject yet. Eating challenges. Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier that there was some textural stuff. What were eating challenges for you as a child, and how are you facing them today? And are there any tips that you would have?
I still have them at the moment. So for me, if I'm having a sandwich, anyhow, there is cucumber and tomato in there. But when the bread gets soggy, I won't touch it. I won't even go anywhere near it because that texture I can't mix together. My thing is white or brown bread, but just cheese. That's it. And if that's how I'm gonna have my sandwich, if it looks any other way, it just won't happen. I tend to soak everything in sauce. If my food is too dry, if my pasta, if there's no sauce in it, I won't touch it. Most of it will go in the bin. And I think my solution is always a bottle of sauce. So that's always worked for me. But I know it had been a struggle growing up. I just wouldn't eat, or I would eat a little bit of my food and then put it to the side. But I think as I become aware and I know how I like my food. But even till this day, sometimes I can go into work and the moment I pick something up and I thought, no, I don't like the texture of that. I can't, and I'd rather go hungry all day than actually eat. And yeah, so it is hard, but yeah, so just finding different ways.
Yeah. And for everyone watching this at home, I mean, there's gastrointestinal issues, there's texture issues. I mean, there's so much that goes into this. I did a 30-minute webinar on a topic called when people say your child with autism will eat when they're hungry, where I talk a lot about picky eating challenges. If you're interested in just checking that out, if you do have food challenges, just message my Facebook page, Carrie's Autism Journey, and I can send you a link where you can check that out. So Because we're getting a little bit close to an hour, I did want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight to hear a little bit about Sandy's amazing story. We highlight self-advocates all year round. This Facebook page is actually my nonprofit, where I host self-advocate videos all year round. So if you have any recommendations for people that we should highlight, either in pre-recorded interviews or Facebook Lives, like with the wonderful Sandy here, please let me know, message me on my Facebook page. I'd be more than happy to potentially talk to them, and who knows, maybe they'll be part of our next interview. Sandy, is there anything else you would like for people at home to know about your story?
I think as we're coming to an end, and as Christmas has just passed, I'll let you know on a little story. So one thing, those on the spectrum, sarcasm and jokes don't quite come together. So, and taking the literal meaning. And I do that very often. So it was Christmas Day, and we're setting out the table, and my sister said, "Oh, Sand, have you got the crackers?" And I looked at her, I said, "We haven't spoken about crackers." And she said, "But you said you've got the crackers." And I said, I was convinced. I said, are you dreaming? We did not have a conversation about crackers. We didn't have that. And she was like, "Sand, I said to you yesterday, while we're setting out the table, have you got the crackers for our Christmas dinner?" And you said you had. And I stopped and I thought about it. And I thought, oh, of course. But I thought she was talking about the Jacob's crackers that you eat with cheese, crackers and cheese. So I looked at her and I was like, well, actually, I thought you was talking about crackers and cheese. I didn't know you was on about Christmas crackers. You need to remember I'm autistic. So I'm going to take the literal meaning. So you need to tell me which crackers. So actually, we had Christmas dinner without our crackers. But yeah, just to let you know that we tend to take the literal meaning. We need to be a little bit more obvious now and then. But yeah.
I think that's so important. I honestly, I didn't understand sarcasm until I was like 12, 13 years old, and jokes would go completely over my head. So I would learn to laugh at anything that I assumed would be funny. And a lot of time that got me into trouble, especially when things were serious, when they were definitely not supposed to be funny. So I think that's really important. And for everyone watching at home, please let's emphasis grow autism more in our autism community, especially those girls who are being misdiagnosed. Sandy, I don't know if the UK has specific prevalent numbers, but boys are diagnosed with autism 4 times more often than girls in the United States. Does the UK have numbers?
Yes, similar to UK, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, got it. So again, I want to thank Sandy for being our guest tonight. This is an ongoing video series we do to spotlight self-advocates truly making an impact in their autism community. Again, I'm Dr. Kerry Magro. I also am autistic. I'm a professional speaker. I'm here with Sandy, an amazing, amazing teacher who was just diagnosed with autism. And Sandy, I can't wait to see what you do next. And I thank everyone for tuning in with us tonight. If you have any additional comments, feel free to post them. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can because we had some really great questions tonight. And